The Battle of Havana. Ya da 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 da. Battle of Havana. Ya da da dee da 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 da. So it's the Battle of Havana. It happened 273 years ago today, and hopefully this recording everything's going to work and go out, and we're all going to be good. Always say hopefully. So, the Battle of Havana. First things first. Those who don't know, my aunt has set me a challenge again. For those who do know, you've heard us already. You might want to skip to the next point. But my aunt has set me a challenge. When I launched a Spreadshirt store, because people were asking for merchandise, so I worked it out and produced something. I quite like some of them. There are some more designs coming. She said that if I got to 13,000 subscribers by December 31st, 2021, she would, and my uncle would, take a photo of themselves wearing Blackburn face masks, which I could post on brew ships. So, on the 2nd of January 2022. So, I'm at 6,770 subscribers. So, the odds of me actually getting there, considering I need 6,230, low, but I'm going to keep trying. Anyway, so where does the Battle of Havana story start? It starts back in 1494. Actually, it arguably starts earlier than that. You can go for the various conquistadors and all the other stuff in South America and in going around the world and the brushing up against each other of the Portuguese and the Spanish Empire. But basically, the reason I've gone to Tordesillas is because this divides the world in two. And it becomes pretty much the defining line for the Spanish and the Portuguese and their claims to ruling the world. And pretty much it's twaddle. But we'll leave that to one side. They never actually achieved that level of control. There are huge empires in that area. There's the Mughal Empire. There's all sorts of things going on in Japan and China at this point. And no, the Portuguese and Spanish ships that turn up are definitely not enough to destabilize. They become a factor, but they're not going to take over. However, and they don't really settle in Australia. In fact, neither of them seems to realize Australia's there. However, South America is a very different story. And of course, thanks to this line, you get Brasilia and Brazil. You get the whole reason Brazil is Portugal. And in terms of Portuguese, and is owned by the Portuguese. And it's, eventually the King of Portugal will go to Brazil and decide he prefers to rule Brazil than Portugal. Is because of this treaty. And the whole reason the Spanish got everywhere else is because of this treaty. Because at the time, the only ones who can contest it with them were the Portuguese, because they were the only ones with the ships. Early adopters, they tend to have a lot out that influence outside of their actual power. Anyway, so by 1741, there is also another empire on the block, the British Empire, and they are interesting. They have their issues, but they are there. And interesting enough, of course, they're not part of this treaty, and even worse, they are Protestant. Or very good from a financial perspective. They're Protestant, so they don't have to pay any attention to the Pope's treaties. Terrible. Sacrilegious. So financially worth it. And so, you have a whole load of other factors coming into play. But the trouble is, and let's be honest, a small, dirty little secret from history. The money that came from the 13 colonies was nowhere near the sheer treasure you got from South America if you were Spain or Portugal. The 13 colonies were good, but it was mainly the home economy which was critical to England's growth and success and its ability to trade around the world. It was slowly getting an empire, and of course, the East India Company exists by this point, but, really? 13 colonies? They're expensive. That's the whole reason they start taxing them, because they are expensive to protect and maintain. They don't like that because they don't have representation. So no taxation, no representation. No representation without taxation. These things happen. It's a vicious circle. But the whole time, the British are sort of looking and going, you have a lot of money, Spain. Now, thanks to earlier actions by Drake and several French pirates and a few Dutch ones, just, doing the piracy thing, Spain had got rather worried. And so they come up with a solution. They would get all their fleets, all their trade to gather in the best harbour they had in that area, and the best harbour they had for meeting the Atlantic routes across, Havana. And they would fortify this harbour. And it would be strongly defended and have large numbers of soldiers there and all these things to protect it. And then that for those ships would be convoyed across the ocean by the Navy. This is all an excellent idea. And convoying, of course, is what they do in World War II and various other scenarios. There is just one small issue. One tinsy-bincy bit of an issue with convoying. And I support convoying. It's a very sensible approach to defending your merchant trade. There is just one small issue. If you convoy regularly and your economy is dependent on bringing that money in, and your opponent knows this, and they know roughly the force you're going to have in that convoy, and they know where that convoy is originating and where it's hoping to end up, and they know roughly its time of operation, well, you are kind of setting yourself up for an issue. Because whether that convoy gets through or not, you still have to pay to administer all those territories and look after them. But if your opponent manages to capture that convoy, they get a lot of money. A lot of money. And they don't have to pay to administer it. So they get a lot of money. But none of the cost. Anyway, it all goes through Havana. So Havana becomes this wonderful hub. And like a hub city into a hub airport or a hub port in modern times, or any hub, you get a wonderful trading metropolis growing up of it. There's lots of money. It's money coming from the government to build its defences and in terms of paying its garrison. There's money from all the traders coming through. There's money from all the people who want to store and sell stuff to those traders, because every time a ship turns up, it's out of something and needs something. And Havana is a very nice place to set up, as you can see. It's a naturally defensible point. It's a huge harbour, which is easily defendable because you have to get through a relatively narrow passage to get into it. That also protects it from the worst elements of the sea. And it's easily fortifiable because the town only has really one land side. Now, if you were like me, you might be wishing that town was a little bit bigger, or if you had a second line of fortification, so that you could include the fort at the mouth of the Narrows in your town's defences. But life doesn't always work out that way. And when you look at the trade routes, you understand why Havana is considered the key to the New World and rampart, and the key rampart in the West Indies. Because look at this. We have, by the way, I've just used the details from Wikipedia, and well, actually from the book, which is also used in Wikipedia to provide these sources. This thing, because every single book seems to disagree on the figures, so don't worry about the figures. But what you have going across here is you see all this beautiful trade network, and everything flows through Havana. Everything flows through Havana. It doesn't matter whether it comes from Manila, it flows through Havana. It doesn't matter if it comes from Macau or Tidor, it flows through Havana. Acapulco, Veracruz, Lima, Panama, it all flows through Havana. If you also notice, the Portuguese have a similar thing going on. You can certainly see Malacca. That's a bit of a choke point. But that's a long way away from any interested parties. And there's Goa and Sochi in India, which help out. And then Rio, Salvador, and Rechel in Brazil. There are lots of different options for the Portuguese. And they also go up to Antwerp as well, which does help with spending their money and making money. But for Spain, it's Seville and Havana. Those are the key ports, because everything comes through that Atlantic route, and that is a circle. So, if you're the Royal Navy, you know where they're coming from, you know where they're going. And that's helpful. But what is your motive for actually going after those airships? Well, your motive comes from the South Sea Company. It really does. It's quite disturbing how much it does come from the South Sea Company. Because in the 1720s, the bubble bursts. The bubble bursts massively on the South Sea Company. And they are not achieving anything. They are not doing well. And they end up, the only way Robert Walpole can stabilize the British finances is if, and I repeat, this is a big if, is if he finds a way for taking over their debt. And he does that by selling their shares to the Bank of England and the East India Company. So the East India Company, which is the most successful of any of these private venture companies, takes a look at their accounts. They take a look at accounts of South Sea Company and go, ouch, you guys are running into a loss here. South Sea Company goes, why? We have our annual ship, which we can send one ship a year to the Spanish colonies with their permission, which that ship tends to generate almost 100% or more profit. Yes, but you only can send one of those ships. And let's see, your fisheries vessels, your Greenland fisheries vessels are going bankrupt and are soon to be discontinued. And your slave trading ships generate not enough profit. I'm sorry, I should have given a little warning disclaimer on that one. That's this East India Company's perspective. They didn't like the slave trade. It didn't generate enough profit at this point. When you perceive humans as things you can buy or sell, then you start treating them as any other goods. It's not good for either side of the equation. Worse for those who are slaves by a long, long way. But once you start making those distinctions about humans for any reason, how long before it bleeds over into your own personal life? Not good for the people around you either. Anyway, so there is a problem. The King of Spain, no matter how hard they try and persuade him, does not want more than one ship a year to come from Britain with trading with his empire, because it makes him a lot of money. And so, there only becomes another one option. That one option is very simple. Declare war. Or get war. Get basically the same as the East India Company has done in India. Take over the hard way. The strong way. The manipulative way. And so we have the War of Jenkins Ear. Which, I'm going to say this now. Why are there so many Norwegian pages devoted to this? Seriously, Norwegian language Wikipedia has dozens of pages devoted to the ships, the officers, the war itself, the battles, all in Norwegian, all beautiful. There is either a very avid, very obsessed, history-minded wiki creator, Norwegian wiki creator, who loves it, or they're just avid followers of wars which have an ear involved. Which, by the way, according to Google Translate, the same word they use for ear translates island. I'm not sure if that's correct. Anyway, the most joyous part about all this, of course, is always the debate you get in students whenever you talk about the War of Jenkins' Ears of, did someone really cut off someone's ear? Isn't that all a bit Games of Thronesy? Well, the rule historians go by is, can we find a surfeit of contemporary accounts? Yes, we can. Can we find other examples of things happening at a similar time which sound similar to that? Yes, we can. So the odds are, yes, it happened. And here is the account I will read which convinced me, which actually I drew from the article by Professor John Lawton, for whom the Lawton Chair of Naval History is named after, on Jenkins' Ear. I was in hopes that you would have made use of your power to have detected and discouraged the violence and villainies which has for a long time been practiced by those whom you distinguish by the name of guarda costas. But as you can't take the least notice to answer that part of my letter, and that I have repeated assurances that you allow vessels to be fitted out of your harbour, particularly by one Fandanino, and others who have committed the most cruel piratical outrages on several ships and vessels of the king my master's subjects, particularly about the 20th of April last, sailed out of your harbour in one of those guarda costas, and met a ship of this island bound for England, and after using the captain in a most barbarous, inhuman manner, taking all his money, cutting off one of his ears, plundering him of those necessaries which were to carry the ship safe home, without doubt with the intent that she should perish in her passage. But as she is providentially cut safe home, and likewise several others that have met with no better usage off the Havana, and the king, my master, having too much reason to believe that these repeated insults on his subjects could never be continued, but by the connivance of several Spanish governors in these parts, is determined by his own honour, as well as for the honour of his Catholic Majesty, who is now in the strictest friendship with, to endeavour to put a stop to this piratical proceedings. What's interesting is this is a letter from the senior admiral at the time, a gentleman called Rear Admiral Stewart, which is pretty darn scary if the senior rear admiral is sending it to you. And he wrote to the governor of Havana, who was at this point His Excellency Dionisio Martinez de la Vega, aka Zorro's great-great-granddad, perhaps? Who knows? Anyway. I don't know. So this is what gives the war its name, the War of Jenkins Ear. But really it becomes the War of Austrian Succession. And really it's coming about because a lot of people want some money. But it's from both sides they want money, because the Spanish would like the money because, frankly, they don't want the English in there. They don't want Jamaica. They don't want any of these things. They are trying to make it as difficult for them to trade and succeed as possible, hence the Guardas Costas actions. And, well, life happens. Sir Charles Knowles. Now, this is an interesting officer. Recently, it's been brought to my attention that in a book about Operation Pedestal, a very famous gentleman who likes to write such history books has referred to Admiral Harwood as a notoriously stupid officer. Well, that's wrong. Harwood wasn't a notoriously stupid officer, and wasn't a stupid officer by any stretch of the imagination, so no. But I would point out that even some of the smartest and best officers can make mistakes. For example, Sir Charles Knowles, who a very knowledgeable source wrote about us, we had not in England a man more thoroughly conversant in nautical affairs, or who better considered the interests of our navy. And you can agree with it. But also is the person who caused the Knowles riot of 1747. Now, Knowles would fight in several battles through his career, but the Battle of Havana is by far the most prominent and probably his greatest one. And he does the Battle of Cape Passaro, the Battle of Cartagena de Indias, Battle of Laguna, Battle of Puerto Cabello, and at that point he's the Commander-in-Chief of Jamaica. Prior to that, he'd been Commander-in-Chief Barbados and Leeward Islands. His commands had include HMS Diamond, Success, Lichfield, the Weymouth, and Suffolk. He is a good and respected naval officer. At one point, he proposes that they build homes for sailors' wives and families near dockyards, so that they will better be served by them, because if their wife and children are being looked after, have a nice home, and have a portion of income coming into them, and are looked after by pensions if anything happens to them, then they are more likely to be considered service members and less likely to cause trouble and discipline. Basically, his idea was, if you provide them with incentives, then they are less likely to cause trouble at sea, and they're less likely to try and get away from us. Look after their families, look after your sailors. Next, after this gentleman, we have Andreas Reggio Braciforte. what can I say? He's got some experience. He was part of, well, he fought in the War of the Quadruple Alliance, serving in the invasion of Sardinia and the Battle of Cape Passaro. Takes part in the relief of Ceuta. Takes part in operations such as the reconquest of Iran in 1732 and Naples in 1733. Commands the Spanish fleet at Ferrol. And honestly, the Battle of Havana is the only big naval battle he seems to be in command of. And he gets beaten. But we'll discuss what happens to him after that. But he ends up being Captain General of the Navy, which is not bad. And again, a lot about him is written about him in Norwegian text. What is it with the Norwegians and this battle? Someone needs to tell Norway they weren't involved. Either that, or I need to find the Norwegian historian who's obsessed with this battle and buy them a drink, because their sources are. Whenever I've been hunting online sources or secondary other sources to find to back up some of the books I've been using, the Norwegian wiki is usually better than the English wiki, and certainly than the Spanish wiki. That's just amazing. Anyway, this is an idealized Spanish galleon from actually a few years later, but it's a good picture to illustrate the Spanish Navy at this point. It's also, if you want to find out about the colours, because you're looking at these colours and probably thinking, oh, surely that's the Royal Navy, those colourings, because that's like HMS Victory. Please. Kate Jameson on Twitter has got many threads, many articles on her website, and I hope someday we'll do a full-on video with either me or Drac going through all this, because the painting of these ships is really interesting, but also you start to realize one of the reasons why they have to have such massive flags to say who they are belong to is because so many of them are painted either completely different colors from each other or all the same colors as both fleets. Anyway, we have Africa, 70 guns. Invincible, 70 guns. Conquistador, 60 guns. Dragon, 60 guns. Nueva España, 60 guns. Rio Familia, 60 guns. Gallagher, 30 guns. And you'll notice that they all have the numbers of guns they're pierced for going down the side. Well, I am not sure why they were carrying less guns than they were pierced for, but I do have a ranking theory in that as Reggio was in charge of a lot of construction work in Havana and had been in charge of a lot of building up the fortifications, had possibly decided that taking roughly 30 guns off his ships and spreading them about the forts or giving them to one of the forts in Havana was probably sensible, because he was going to be taking a large number of port forces away, because this squadron is coming out. It's supposed to be coming out with the convoy. They're taking troops on those ships. They've got all sorts of things on their ships. It's a huge amount of forces leaving Havana. And Havana is critical because, remember, the ships coming back are coming back to Havana. And Havana is where all the other ships meet up there. Havana is this critical place. You cannot afford it to be undefended. So that's what I think is going on. Now, with the British squadron, I have cheated. That is a picture of the Battle of Cape St. Vincent. And I chose that because some of these ships actually have pictures waiting for them. And so I'm going to individually go through them. But first of all, we should look at the squadron. They have Cornwall with 80 guns. That's the second rate. Lennox with 70 guns. At this point, that's the second rate. Tilbury. I don't know. They're both third rates. Sorry. Brain dying. Cornwall, Lennox are both third rates. But it's a good reminder we can all make mistakes. Tilbury, 60 guns. Stratford, 60 guns. Warwick, 60 guns. Canterbury, 60 guns. Oxford, 50 guns. Now, for those of you who are noticing, There is an interesting name there. Far more interesting than Holmes. Or Holmes, who, well, let's be honest, Holmes probably, it could be a relative of Sherlock, but probably as likely as the Spanish governor being a relative of Zorro. But there is an HMS Canterbury, which is commanded by an Edward Clarke. And this starts off my interest in the battle because my dad always claimed that he's one of the great uncles going back. So I'm not sure who the common ancestor is, but it wouldn't surprise me to an extent based on where he comes from and some of the other things about him that you find out in books like Command of the Ocean by Nicholas Rogers. It might be, but I have no confirmation. I certainly do. We certainly have a long history of family service in the Navy and building ships and commanding ships and building ships and commanding ships. So, potentially. Anyway. So here is HMS Cornwall. Now, one interesting thing is that almost all the ships involved in this battle, in terms of the British squadron, have not only Wikipedia pages, they all seem to have Wikipedia pages, but they have pictures available, or paintings. I think it's only Tilbury, Stratford, which don't. Now, Cornwall, well, she's launched in 1692 after being ordered in 1691 and is commissioned in 1692 and broken up in 1761. So, interesting enough, she really has one of the shortest careers of any of the ships involved. She's only 69 years old when she finishes her career. Some of the others are going to be 84 years. Most of them are going to be in their 70s. As of her 1726 rebuild, she's established onto the 1719 establishment as an 80-gun third-rate ship of the line. She's 1,350 tons burthen, and she has 26 32-pounders, 26 12-pounders, 24 6-pounders, and on the upper deck, and 4 6-pounders on the quarterdeck. And she, as well as Havana, she takes part in the battles of Parfleur and La Hogue. Lennox. Lennox is also a third rate. She's a 70-gun third rate, and she's rebuilt in 1723. She had been launched in 1678 and would be sunk as a breakwater in 1756. So, in simple terms, she has a career of 78 years. She has, at the time of this battle, 26 24-pounders on her gun deck, an upper gun deck of 26 12-pounders, quarter deck of 14 6-pounders, and a forecastle which also has 4 6-pounders. And she takes part in a fair number of battles, including, of course, the Battle of Malaga and various other things, as well as the Battle of Havana. And that is not a misspelling. There is an HMS Orford. Have a look it up. This is Warwick. And by the way, here is one of the things I find really cool about these pictures. You can download them off Wikipedia. These plans you can download off Wikipedia. Now, Warwick would, of course, actually be captured by the French in 1756, but recaptured by Alexander Hood in 1759. Oh, no, 1761, and would be broken up in 1761 because the Royal Navy decided they didn't like any ship which had, been soiled by French presence. It was a British ship which had been soiled. Anyway. As of her establishment, which she's built to, when she's built in, well, she's ordered 1727, launched 1730, laid down 1730, launched 1733, and completed 1734. She's built in Pearson Lock, Plymouth Dockyard. And she has 24 24-pounders on her gun deck. She has 26 9-pounders on her upper gun deck. She has a quarter deck, which has 8 6-pounders, and a forecastle, which has 2 6-pounders. Then we have Canterbury. Now, Canterbury is another gorgeous one. And she's launched in 1693 and broken up in 1770. So she will serve 77 years. She gets rebuilt in 1722 to the 1719 establishment. And she is armed with 24 24-pounders, 26 9-pounders, 8 6-pounders on the quarter deck, and 2 6-pounders on the forecastle. She has a pretty cool career. Oh, and something I should have mentioned back when we were talking about HMS Lennox. There is actually a proposal started in 2013, so it's been hanging around for 8 years. I'm not sure how well the project is doing. And in 2015, it did appear to gain some momentum, but again, there's been 6 years and nothing's appeared yet. Of plans for actually building a full-size sailing replica of HMS Lennox to be stored in the site of the old Deptford Dockyard, where the original Lennox was built, and to be part of, well, it's part of the overall development of the Convoy's Wharf, so that she'd be in walking distance of Cuddy Sark and Museum at Greenwich, and would have been something really lovely to have. But so far, honestly, it seems to have disappeared a bit, and that's a bit annoying. HMS Oxford, I have done another mistake here. It's amazing. Historians are humans too. We make mistakes. She's actually a 50-gun ship. I'm sorry. Going through, I must have just hit the wrong type. But she is originally built as a 54-gun 4-freighter ship of the line. And by 1719, in her 1727 rebuild, she's established in the 1719 establishment, which is a 50-gun 4-freight. And as a 50-gun 4-freight, she carries 22 18-pounders, 22 9-pounders, 4 6-pounders, and the quarter deck, and 2 6-pounders in the forecastle. But here is the point about this ship. She serves from 1674 to 1758. 1674 to 1758. 84 years. At one point, she's commanded by Merritt Arbuthnot, who, of course, is part of the Royal Navy's admirals in the American War of Independence. She takes part in the Battle of Barfleur and does all sorts of operations in her career. But she's considered a useful ship for 80-odd years. That's a well-built ship. So, the Battle of Havana. I'm making sure you're going to remember that song. Well, my version of that song. So, on the morning of the 1st of October, the Havana squadron was under the command of Admiral Reggio, sailed north in loose formation. Reggio sights what he believes to be a Spanish convoy and decides to, well, on the morning of the 12th of October. My notes, I put in question mark 1 or 12 because on the Wikipedia it's got it as 1 and it's actually 12 and I read out the wrong one. I do apologize. Let me start off again. The Battle of the 12th of October. On the morning of the 12th of October, Admiral Don Andreas Reggio is sailing loose formation and he has his convoy, his squadron going north roughly. And he cites what he thinks is a Spanish convoy. He thinks it's this organization of Spanish ships. This already claims, but any convoy should be forming up on Havana. So if they're not, it seems a bit iffy to me. But maybe he's being relaxed, and maybe there are a few convoys which probably do try and go through. So maybe try and avoid playing some of the dues, as in DUES, dues. And anyway, so trying to avoid that, and he sort of aims for them. And with his intent apparently to intercept it and offer to escort it. Now, I wonder about this one because it does sound like a very, very nice rewriting of events afterwards. Because that explains why he's in loose formation and explains why he sails right into the waiting arms of the enemy going, hello! Anyway. Knowles, who is in charge of the British Jamaica Squadron, sights the formation of vessels sailing directly towards him, and immediately signals his own squadron to form line ahead, bearing north. His aim was to try and gain the weather gauge on the Havana squadron. Now, it's at this point Reggio seems to realise that he'd actually sighted the British Jamaica Squadron, not on a convoy, mainly because they're forming line, but possibly of the fact that they were actually forming line. He immediately signals to steer to leeward in order to facilitate his formation going into line ahead, and to also try and gain the weather gauge. However, by steering at this angle, he actually manages to lose the weather gauge. Knowles therefore gives the signal for the ships in his line to lead large, with the Spanish on a more convergent course. The afternoon wind manages to change, and the two leading ships, Canterbury and HMS Warwick, in Knowles' line, drifted within long range of Reggio's centre. Now, here's where you start to get problems, because Knowles had issued standing orders to his entire command to hold their fire till everyone was in range. Hold that punch, get as close as possible, and then punch hard. But Canterbury and Warwick decide that, you know what, we're in range of the Spanish, we're going to return fire. And Warwick also slows down a bit. So Knowles has to order Canterbury to pass her at 3 p.m. However, what it does mean is that it's not till 4 p.m. that HMS Cornwall and HMS Lennox, his two biggest fists, his two third rates, actually enter the engagement. And the British line do seem to focus their firepower on Conquistador, which loses its fore and mizzenmast and, well, can only be manoeuvred in a small way by a certain point. It's a nasty battle going on. Cornwall had held its fire until it came within pistol range. So even though it had been under fire, it waited till it was in pistol range of Africa, and then it unleashes its broadside. Stratford focuses on Conquistador, and Lennox joins her in that one. At 4:30 p.m., from close range, Stratford almost overwhelms Conquistador in a single punch. In fact, this is showing the actions versus Africa and Conquistador. This picture, if you look carefully at where they are and what's going on. At about 5:30, its captain and 2 lieutenants dying dead, the Conquista actually struck its flag to the Stratford. Stratford, however, decided it was trying to actually get herself organised herself and failed to send a boat prompt enough to take possession of her. And so Reggio actually recognised this fact and forced Conquistador to rehoist her colours by firing on her from Africa. At which point, Cornwall and Canterbury, Cornwall, of course, with Knowles aboard, comes up, and Conquistador again strikes her colours to Cornwall. The interesting enough, the captain of Canterbury, the lovely Edmund Clarke, claims that actually she'd struck her flag to him. But that might have been a case of to try and get the prize money. Oh. By 5:30 p.m., HMS Warwick had finally managed to overtake the Spanish. And with this, every Spanish ship attempted to save themselves. At which point, Stratford and Canterbury focused their fire on Africa, while Tilbury and Oxford pursued the Invincible. By 9 p.m., Invincible wasn't returning far, but none of the British ships were in capability to pursue. Cornwall was slowed down by the loss of 4 topsail, and Stratford and Canterbury were still pounding Africa until its main and mizzenmast fell. Of Reggio's squadron, only 4 ships would get back to Havana's Hammer. Conquistador was captured. Invincible almost captured. Africa was dismasted. It was a terrible action. And in the end, the stranded crew of Africa cut at her cables, set her on fire, and ran her onto shore. And British cannon fire continued on to try and pour into the ship, which caused her to blow up. So, the losses for the Spanish were 1 ship captured, Conquistador, Africa destroyed, Invincible pretty much beyond repair, 86 dead, 197 wounded, and 470 captured. For the British, it was 59 killed and 120 wounded. So, that sounds all fairly normal. What's the point about this battle? Well, this is the point about this battle. Both admirals end up in court-martial afterwards. Both. Reggio is court-martialed on 30 separate accounts, which cover pretty much the entire battle, and in particular, the destruction of Africa. He is cleared by act of king, broadly speaking, and becomes Captain General of the Department of Cadiz and the General Director of the Navy, a post which he holds till 1780. So 31 years when he dies. Knowles, the winner of this battle, surely he should be lauded. But unfortunately, well, before any further action could have been pursued against the ships, a Spanish sloop turns up with news of the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, which of course ends the war. And so Knowles drops off the Spanish prisoners in Cuba and sets sail towards Jamaica with his lone prize. After all, the prize had been fairly won. It was quickly discerned that the fact that they hadn't won an overwhelming victory was due to the lack of tactical cohesion within the squadron. So they could not come to a close enough engagement quickly enough. The British squadron had also fired on Spanish too soon at too great a range. And this Knowles took personally, because remember his orders had been not to. Knowles pretty much vilified all the captains under his command, barring David Brodie and Edward Clarke. So that's the captains of Stratford and Canterbury. The reason he didn't vilify them is he said they maintained orders, maintained discipline, and their ships were always where they're supposed to be in the battle. In other words, they did exactly the job they were supposed to be doing. But the other officers demand a court-martial to clear their names. He still eventually retains his rank of admiral in 1758. So that's good, 10 years later. But he has a mixed reputation after this. And other captains aren't willing to serve with him. Principally because they felt he'd vilified them in the press rather than arguing with them at the time of his dispatches. It's an issue. Well, what have we got coming up? We have 14th of October. We have Patron 34, Richard Vasava's The Naval Career of Jackie Fisher, which is rather interesting, coming on just after the Dreadnought period. And before, well, we've got the Battle of Trafalgar coming up on the 21st of October. But we've also got this one, where, let's be honest, the Imperial High Seas Fleet, Tarkin replaces Tirpitz, and Thrawn replaces Shear at Jutland. So Fisher's opposite number becomes Tarkin. That's be interesting. And we've got interwar naval logistics. That's going to be a fun month. Right. And a reminder, there is currently a little competition going with my aunt. If I can get to 13,000 subscribers by December 31st, she and my uncle will wear Blackburn face masks. I'm nice. I don't use the pictures of the Blackburn in these announcements. I'm saving your eyes. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked, and have a nice day. Oh, and a little bonus. George Anson and the capture of a Manila galleon. Now, why did I bring this in here? Well, this is the point. The Royal Navy had been so interested in trying to cut off this trade route, these trade routes of Spain with their empires. They'd actually sent a squadron under Anson into the Pacific. This was made up of 4 freights and, well, some 4 freights, and merchant vessels to carry supplies. And it's an absolutely atrocious voyage. They lose ships, they have a mutiny, all sorts of things. They have to circumnavigate the globe, which makes Anson's reputation as a navigator. But they do manage to capture the Manila galleon. And this gives them so much wealth, so much money, that it makes his career, allows him to become an admiral. And this is what Royal Navy officers were always considering when they were looking at Spanish ships. Are you another Manila galleon? Will we make a lot of money off you? Thank you for watching.